So we're at an interesting little road cut. It's got this interesting oxidization zone that just produces some interesting patterns. You can kind of see up there, there's some patterns. And here's some of the loose stuff. This one's got some cool colorations. Here's a pretty cool piece. This is a good example. It's unfortunately cracked, but if I can't find anything better, I might just take this one with me because I do like the patterns on this one. So you can see it's just iron oxides, but just the way it stains it is quite vibrant and interesting, and the patterns that are caused are quite interesting. You can see the very interesting just patterns and everything. Some pretty cool stuff. I apologize for not having more of the collection part of the video. This was literally a quick 10 to 15 minute stop on the side of the road as we were rolling out of town, heading back home. And this was just a quick pit stop on the way out of town to pick up some interesting material. This material is known as Temagami sunrise stone, and it has some very interesting iron oxide kind of dendritic-like patterns, along with actually, in fact, some manganese or magnesium dendrites. So let's, for those who don't know, get into what are dendrites in the first place. So with dendrites, they're a type of almost tree-like, branch-like growth of mineralization. What occurs is at the beginning point of the dendrite, the mineral mineralizes, and then for whatever reason, it basically takes the path of least resistance as it grows and mineralizes further along the matrix. So what happens is you get this branch-like, tree-like pattern, and that pattern is known as a dendritic pattern. You can see that here with these iron oxide patterns here. Specifically, when I'm talking about iron oxides, the yellow iron oxide is most likely the iron oxide mineral known as limonite, which is a hydrated iron oxide mineral. And then the red is most likely one of the unhydrated iron oxide type minerals. And for those who don't know, iron oxides are basically the red, especially the red iron oxides, are going to be the same type of iron oxides you find in rust on rusty metals. But in this case, these are naturally occurring iron oxides that have formed on what I believe is some sort of sedimentary rock. I think maybe like a mudstone-ish type of rock, but I could be wrong. But yeah, these dendrites are quite interesting, and like a tree, they start off with one singular mineralized point, like a seed starts off a tree, and then they grow and branch out, taking the path of least resistance to branch out. And because of this, you get this very red and yellow vibrant patterns on the stone. Like I mentioned before, these also have some type of magnesium or manganese dendrites. And these are what they look like partially close up, and I will try and get them under the microscope so that you guys can see some nice close microscopic examples of these darker dendrites, these darker, smaller dendrites which are found on some of these rocks. Actually, a lot of them have them, but they're quite small, so they just look like black little spots. These are just some of the larger examples that I spotted on the specimens I took back. So you might be wondering why these patterns formed like this. I can't tell you exactly how, but I suspect it has to do with just the fractured rock. So this material comes out of this fractured zone that has a lot of kind of rusty water leaking out of it. So what I believe is happening is you have this fractured vein of rock, and these rocks are pressed up against each other, and some spots they're kind of fully contacted, and then some spots they're loose enough for this water to seep in and deposit the iron oxide mineralization. And so what happens is that slowly over time, with the freeze and the thaw, the rocks are kind of forced apart and cracked apart, and so more of the iron oxide can kind of get into the fractures and deposit itself on the stone, leaving this red kind of dendrite-ish like formation. Now, with that information out of the way, let's just take a closer look at each of the pieces I brought home. Some of them aren't as fancy as the others. This one I would say is my best piece. I actually had to repair it. It had fallen out of the crack and I found it in 2 pieces. But putting back the 2 pieces together, it still looked quite cool. So I took it back and then glued the pieces together. So it's now one singular repaired piece and it looks quite fascinating. So we'll start off with this one. This one you can see a lot more of the iron oxide got in, so the dendrites aren't as well formed. And they're kind of wide and splotchy, and then you got this really kind of powdery iron oxide that got deposited as well. So it's not super crazy, and you can see kind of along here where they're, like I mentioned, the fractures. So where the fractures were fully exposed and there's no contact with the rock beside it, you get just fully rusted iron oxide deposited deposits, basically. But then whenever there is some type of contact point or some type of resistance, you get this dendritic deposits. Now I grabbed a couple smaller pieces just to display around my apartment because I like little pieces that I can just have out and look at. I like that. That's how I want to decorate my living space, is with rocks and minerals, because I'm a big rock and mineral nerd in the first place. So I thought I'd take a couple of the more interesting pieces that I found on that quick pit stop and have them as little decorations around the apartment. This piece is interesting because it actually has a lot of deposits of manganese or magnesium. This black kind of slightly dull metallic stuff here. That's all those magnesium dendrite things. And here's a closer look of those patterns with the magnesium or manganese deposits. I'll try and look under the microscope at these deposits and see if there are any interesting patterns to show you guys. If that does occur, I'll throw them up in the video so that you guys can enjoy them. But yeah, this piece I grabbed it because it has a lot more than what I was usually spotting for manganese or magnesium deposits. So with this piece, you can kind of see it's really only kind of this section that has the patterns, but there's some quite vibrant reds in there, and then there's also some nice vibrant yellows. So this piece came home with me, and it sits nice and flat, so it's one of those good pieces to display just around my apartment as a little decoration. And so it was definitely coming home with me because it looked cool and I appreciate it. And there you can see those black dots, like I mentioned, more of those manganese or magnesium dendrites. This is one of the bigger pieces I took home with me. It only really has the deposits on the bottom here, but I still took it because I like those deposits. And then I also noticed that it had some relatively larger sized magnesium or manganese dendrites. So I thought that would come home with me, and it would be cool to kind of look under the microscope and see what these deposits look like under the microscope. So this came home with me, and now it sits on a stand on my fireplace mantle and looks all pretty. Last but definitely not least is this big long piece. Like I mentioned before, I found it fractured in 2 pieces, but it repaired up very nicely. The fractures were very clean. You can kind of see them along here, but with all of this busyness of the iron oxide deposits, it kind of disappears, so you don't really notice it, which is quite awesome because the patterns on this one are quite amazing. You can see where the water didn't really seep in as much, and then you can see where it did, and it had some very interesting pathways that it kind of flowed through and deposited these iron oxides with. Some places it really feathers out, like along the bottom here, you can see it all feathers out from basically the bottom. But then in some places it just branches out and goes crazy, like the roots of a tree trying to seek nutrients in the ground. So this piece is quite cool, and I'm quite happy with it. And I think this is just a great example of what people would usually call a very boring mineral, or a very uninteresting mineral, can sometimes produce some very amazing looking pieces of natural art, I would say, because this just does look like natural art. This brings us to the end of the video. Please do let me know if you found these pieces interesting. I know it's not the flashy, crystalline minerals that I sometimes post, but I like to do a wide variety of stuff, and I like to post on stuff that I personally find interesting. So I hope you guys found these interesting, and please do let me know if you did find them interesting, or there's a specific piece that you really liked, because I always enjoy your feedback. Please, if you haven't already, and this is your first time watching my videos, please do like and subscribe. I do a whole bunch of rockhounding related videos, so if that's your cup of tea, I do those. And please, folks, just have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys in the next video.